lovely freaks, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Amanda.
And I'm Hannah.
And if you're new here, hi, welcome. If you like things strange and unusual and true crime, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe or follow button. You can also head down to the description box and you'll see a link that will take you to our social media like Instagram, Facebook, and all that jazz. Yeah. So, sorry about our episode of Elise Paler not being uploaded on Friday on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere, actually, except for YouTube. I think that I forgot to hit publish whenever I was uploading it, but whatever, accidents happen.
Yeah.
But it was up Monday. So if you haven't listened to that one, you can go ahead and listen to it. So you all got 2 episodes this week for anybody that doesn't listen to us on YouTube. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys had a great week. Hannah has not, but that's okay. No. Do you want to tell them, or do you not really care?
I mean, my car got hit by
a dumbass.
Dumbasses.
Yeah.
Kids, don't drink and drive. Okay? Don't drink and drive. Don't get high and drive.
She's fine. Her car was actually parked at a friend's house, and it was, they just lost control and hit her car and totaled it. So yeah, it's been a fun week. And you guys better be glad you're getting an episode, because she had that going on, and then I had kids starting school officially like this whole week. So yeah, it's been crazy. But we also got a new puppy.
Yep.
So,
college is about to start for me.
College is about to start for her. So it's been crazy. But we have a 2-part episode for you guys. I know I don't like doing 2 parts, but this one deserved 2 parts because it's a lot of information. This is actually a serial killer that not very many people have heard of.
Mary doesn't know him.
Yeah. His mom's name is Mary.
Huh.
Not very many people have heard of, and I'm not exactly sure why, because I was looking up, I wanted to look up, serial killers that aren't famous,
Yeah.
And so I was Googling that, and then I came across this list of different people, and this one piqued my interest because I was like, what? He has been known, he has at least 28 confirmed kills of teen boys, and then there's probably more out there, they just don't know. So this is a lot. Yeah. So I didn't really understand why he wasn't more prevalent, but...
And you said that they used to call him the Candyman.
Yeah.
So which really piqued my interest,
he's nicknamed the Candyman, the Pied Piper, and you'll understand why eventually. But for today, we're just going to kind of start off with his life and the whole situation with the candy store and everything, and we'll get into that. Because you kind of need to know his life in order to... And his life wasn't hard, but...
There's a candy store involved.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We'll get into it. Okay, so Dean Corll.
Corll.
Corll. It really is Corll, but I just like saying that. If you get that reference, then you watch The Walking Dead and you know what I'm talking about. So anyways, he was born December 24th, my mother-in-law's birthday, 1939, in Indiana. His mother was Mary Robertson, and his dad was Arnold Corll. His dad was a strict dad, but he wasn't necessarily abusive. I think he kind of was one of those dads that was you're going to be a man, and I'm going to show you how to be a man, and not necessarily abusive, but just stern, I guess you could say, and strict. However, the mom was very defensive, and she was protective over her boys no matter what. So she actually had 2 boys. He was the oldest, and she had another one, his brother. And she was one of those mothers of boys that were my boys would never, you know what I mean? Kind of person.
Boys will be boys.
That's exactly a quote that she says. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
He just murdered someone. Boys will be boys,
So his parents fought a lot when he was being raised, because obviously the mom was not strict, the dad was, and it was just a conflict, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, he never was violent with them. They just got into a lot of arguments. Dean, his younger brother's name was Stanley, But you don't really hear a lot about him in the story after this certain part, so it's not really prevalent, I don't think. Since they argued all the time, they ended up getting a divorce, and they would actually get remarried again, but then get a divorce again. So they get remarried, get another divorce, but we'll get into all that. Dean's childhood is told mostly from the mouth of his mother, Mary, because actually Dean is dead. And I don't want to say how yet. We'll get into that in the second, in part 2. But it's crazy. So I don't want to say why. But most of his childhood we've gotten from the mouth of his mother. So remember, she believes that, like, her kids can do no wrong. So she doesn't really ever say, yes, he tortured animals. Yes, he was weird. I mean, none of that ever comes out of her mouth. Not saying that he did do that. I'm just saying,
like, she probably didn't say anything because she just did. She was just like, boys will be boys, you know.
Yeah. Well, actually, when Dean was younger, he was very shy. She did say that. He would rarely socialize with kids. At one point, I think he even, like, got mad because he was either playing a sport or he was at a birthday party. I can't remember which one it was. But whatever the case was, he didn't get a prize. He didn't get an award, a participation award, or nothing
so
like
they
that.
were, like, playing a game or something.
Yeah, and he got mad, and he got, like, embarrassed about it. And so he said from that moment on, he was 6, mind you. From that moment on, he was like, I don't want to ever be in a social situation again. And he, like, didn't. Like, he didn't go to birthday parties or anything. He didn't want to go. He was a loner kid, you know, at 6. And I was like, wow, that's intense.
I mean, I've been mad before at a birthday party because...
But I've never been like...
Yeah, to the point where I'm like,
all these kids.
Never going anywhere again.
Like, I'll never go to the park.
Like, I'll say that, but it won't happen.
Yeah. At 7, he got a really bad fever, and I couldn't find out what kind of fever it was. It was just like a fever virus, I guess you could say, and it was actually attacking kids in their, like, their brains and hearts and stuff like that. Well, they didn't know that it was this particular virus until years later, when he was about 11, I believe. He got diagnosed with a heart murmur, and then they kind of, like, put the puzzle pieces together, and they're like, okay, well, I guess if you had that fever, that's probably what it was. So on top of being painfully shy and not wanting to be socialized, now he was not allowed to play PE. He wasn't allowed to play any sports. He wasn't necessarily a sickly kid, because you'll find out later, like, I think this heart murmur, back then, I mean, this was the... What'd I say? He was born in the 50s?
50s.
Yeah, 30s. He was born in the 30s.
30s.
So yeah, back in this was like probably the 40s. You know, if a kid had a heart murmur, they thought, okay, he can't really exert himself, or he might have like his heart might stop or something like that. But as you find out later, he actually wasn't really in bad condition, obviously, or he wouldn't be able to do the things that he does, the awful things that he does. So yeah, this kind of made him more of a recluse, I guess you could say, not being able to play with other kids and stuff like that. In 1950, him and his mom and dad remarried, like I said before, and they moved to Texas. When they moved to Texas, Dean would do something really odd, and his mom, like you said that boys will be boys. Yeah. But he would catch squirrels, strangle them, and tie them to a necklace on his body, and then take it to school and wear it.
What?
I don't know.
What did the school do?
I don't know. I couldn't find anything out about that. So
where did he live again?
In Texas, but it was Texas in the 50s. But still, I mean,
yeah. Still, that would have been weird.
Yeah, that'd be like our grandparents being like, "Oh yeah, boy came to school with a squirrel around his neck." I mean, my grandparents would be like, "The fuck." I mean, you know, they were like, that's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah, so it's just really odd. But she said boys will be boys. obviously, like I said, and that's just her motto. And she was like, "Oh, all the boys were doing it back then. All the boys were wearing squirrels around their neck."
Maybe if they're
please,
hunting, but they're not like showing it around like that.
Like they went to school with it
or
on.
kill them with their bare hands. Like that just doesn't happen.
At this point, the parents divorce again, and Mom remarries to a guy named Jake West. He is a salesman, and they have a daughter together. Her name is Josie, I believe. I didn't write it down, but I think that's what her name is. I don't know. His siblings don't really matter. They're not in this, like, at all, hardly. He's pretty much the only one that ends up working at the candy shop, and the other siblings don't really have anything to do with it. He's definitely a mama's boy, and we'll get into that. They have, Dean, hates his stepfather. So they don't really get along. The mom has to kind of like constantly keep them from fighting and all this other crap. Dean's mother, Mary, starts making pecan chocolate candies. You know, like turtles and stuff like that. She makes all kinds of different candies. Well, she eventually starts a business called Pecan Prince. It's a candy store. Dean starts working at the candy shop every day after school. And that's pretty much what he does. I mean, every day. And throughout all his life, like, people would say his work ethic was, like, impeccable. Like, you know, I mean, he worked at the candy store pretty much until he was in his
most serial killers are
late
like
20s.
that. Do you realize that?
Yeah, they have a good work ethic. Like, they still go to work.
Yeah.
Well, except for Jeffrey Dahmer, there towards the end. When he was like, I can't come to work. But he, you know, he had bodies in his...
Yeah.
He had shit he was dealing with. But
John Gacy.
John Gacy, yeah. He works.
He worked like a ton and still
and
had
he was,
time to
he was on
kill
like
people.
the board of like city or... What's it called?
City
council or
council,
whatever, yeah. And I mean, yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer, he worked until he got overwhelmed with the bodies he had to take care of in his house or apartment. Ted Bundy, yeah, they all work. So in high school, he had good grades. He had a few girlfriends. He also played in the band. And after high school, the family moved to Houston, Texas, where they opened a bigger candy store because apparently that was where most of their business was at, was Houston, Texas. Like the dad, or Jake, the stepdad, he would like travel back and forth from, I think they were in Plano, Texas, which is really small. He would travel back and forth, and eventually they were like, we're making more money in Houston, so we'll just move there. During this time, Dean's grandfather died back in Indiana, so he was sent to go help his grandmother out in Indiana at the farm. While living there, he started doing some pretty weird stuff. So this is where things get a little weird. He had a telescope that he would use, and his grandmother, like, he told his grandmother he was using it to, like, look at the stars or whatever. Because he was, like, big into astrology. And that was another thing, like, his mom was big into, like, astrology. She even, like, at a lot of points in his life, she would, like, go to, what are they called? Fortune tellers. And she would be, like, or not fortune tellers, but, what's it called?
Oh, yeah, like gypsy people.
Yeah, and she would tell me my, like...
Future.
Or what's going on with my son or something like that.
Yeah.
And all this
they would read
weird...
their palm and everything.
Yeah, so she would do that. So, anyways, however, his grandmother realized one night, he came into his room and she was like, oh, you know, you got your telescope out? And he was like, yeah, come here and look at this. And he was like spying on the neighbors, like around this little big town.
They always do that too. They always spy on people.
He was spying on his neighbors, and his grandmother was like, okay, that's weird.
Weird. Yeah, why didn't she be like, hey, don't be doing that?
I mean, she probably did, but yeah, it was just really odd. So he eventually got a movie camera, like a camcorder recorder, and it had to be like an older style. But he obviously, I mean, this had to be like in the early 60s probably, or late 50s, early 60s. So they did have pretty good camcorders back then. So he got one, and he invited a bunch of like junior high and high school kids. Keep in mind, he's like 20. He's like 19 or 20. And he invited a bunch of these kids over to make movies that were like doctor style. Like they would like they would like
and stuff.
Well, half naked, but they would have like blood and they would have chicken hearts, and they would be like, okay, you know, they'd pull it out and they'd be like, all right, paddles clear, you know, they'd be making like that kind of movie.
Okay.
And I just was like, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that if you really want to be like a movie director, but
it's a weird that you're
it's a little weird that you're asking high school kids and junior high kids to come
yeah.
over to make this movie with you. Like, you don't have any 20-year-old friends that want to make a movie, which, I mean, he didn't have any friends, period. But anyways, so that's just kind of weird. But after this, he eventually moved back to Houston to help run the candy store. At 24, he gets enlisted into the Army. This is like 1964. He trained as a radio repairman, and he was stationed at Fort Hood. However, it wasn't long. He was only in the Army for like 10 months or something like that. And he applied for a hardship discharge, basically saying that like he needed to go back to the candy store to help his family out because they were needing his help and all this stuff. His mom even wrote a letter to like the Army and was like, I need him back to help me, you know. He was a big time mama's boy. Yeah. And so they did. They honorably discharged him, because you can do a hardship discharge, which means like, you know, there's hardships in your family or something and you need to get out. But the fact that they let him get out for that, I just thought that was a little weird. But maybe they didn't like him.
Maybe the mom annoyed him enough. Annoyed the Army enough.
That's another thing I was thinking, yeah.
They were like, okay, whatever, just have him.
Get out. Yeah. It has to be noted, though, that he hated the military. So he probably was writing to his mom about how much he hated it. And also that when he was in the military, people say that that's kind of when he discovered he was gay. Like, he discovered he was a homosexual because he had, like, homosexual experiences and things like that. Even an employee at the candy shop said that he made sexual advances at him, and the mother didn't believe the teen, so she fired him. Instead of, like, believing the teenager, she fired him. So he's back working at the candy shop, and when he gets started back from the Army, he starts dating a woman named Wanda. Mary's, like, super excited about this because he's never really been interested in women, and she's like, oh yay, maybe he's not gay, you know. And she would even ask like the gypsies and the fortune tellers, she'd be like, is my son gay, you know, or something like that, and they would always just be like, no, he's not gay. And I'm just like, well, obviously you lost all that money for nothing. I'm not saying people can't tell the future, don't come for me, people, but I'm just saying some these of them obviously were hustling her. Yeah. Now, Wanda lived in Indiana, and they met each other when he was at his grandmother's, so they had kind of been talking and connecting back and forth. He would send her letters, and they would see each other every now and again, but it was kind of hard to see each other all the time. And he would send her, like, chocolates and cakes and stuff that the candy store would make and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Well, one night, she calls him, and this is really odd, but she calls him, and she's like, hey, I'm getting married. And he was like, what? And to who? And she said, to you. And he was like, huh? And then he just hung up the phone and never talked to her again.
What?
Yeah. I thought that was really weird. I was like,
that
what?
Is so weird.
It's weird on her part, but my thought process was,
like, it was a joke. Like, it's time for you to marry me.
Maybe that, or maybe the mom, like, called her and was like, hey, so you think you need to, like, nudge him in the right direction to get this marriage rolling? Yeah. You know, because his mom really wanted her to get married.
But I can't believe he never called her again.
Yeah, never picked up the phone again. His mom was really upset, obviously. And after this, his mom and stepdad got a divorce. And his stepdad actually got the ownership rights to the pecan prince, which I thought was kind of fucked up because she did come up with the idea. And she had all the recipes and everything. Since he did this, Dean's mom decided she was going to open a new candy store called Corll Candy Company. And she opened it across the street from an elementary school, which seems like a really good place. You know, I mean, across the street from elementary school, you know, it's a candy store, and it was a good place, but it wasn't a good place for Dean to be, and you'll figure out why. The Corll candy store and the Pecan Prince started having like a candy store feud. Meanwhile, Dean was known around town for giving kids, like all the kids, the local kids, he would go out there and give them free candy. Mostly teenage boys. And they gave him the nickname, and that's when they got the nickname, the Candyman or the Pied Piper, because, you know, he was like in the Pied Piper, he plays the thing and the mice come to him. Yeah. But in this case, he
had the candy and the kids would come to him.
Yeah, you know, like how people say, don't,
if a stranger offers you
candy, don't get in their van. Well, he eventually gets a van.
Wow, he does the old trick.
Yeah, so I think that's where this expression came from.
Probably.
Or something, because, yeah, it's weird. So a lot of people would say he was like a troop leader, like a scout leader. So they didn't necessarily think it was creepy, because there wasn't any, like, at first, there wasn't any sexual advances or anything weird. You know, he was just the awesome guy that worked at the candy store that was just out there giving candy out to these kids, you know. And they kind of looked at him as like a role model. Some of the kids did. People thought it was, you know, like a Big Brother situation. But Dean was said to be a cool boss at the candy store. So he kind of started being weird at the candy store first, and then he ventured out, and we'll get there. He made a hangout spot for teens that worked there in the back of the candy store. He had like pool tables and big screen TVs and all this stuff. However, a lot of people said that he was very flirty with the teen boys that would work there. So Dean took one of the candy vans, like the vans that they would drive around and deliver shit in, and he turned that into a theater room type, I don't know, something. Like he put TVs in the back, and he put carpet back there and like couches, and he would take teenage kids
there to hang out,
and he would take them to the beach nearby to surf.
Yeah.
And they would all like be in his van watching movies.
Now,
and,
how
like,
old is he
out.
now? Like late 20s, early 30s?
Yeah,
something?
he's like 26.
The fuck?
Yeah, he's like 20, 24, 25, 26, somewhere in there. So he's like old. I mean, compared to these 13, 14, 15-year-old boys.
That'd be like Isaac going to hang out with like one of
I'd
your
be like,
friends.
you're fucking going where? No,
my friends.
Negative.
Yeah.
No, you're not. So he said he did this because he would take the boys, you know, to the beach, and they would just have fun. This wasn't like a creepy thing or nothing like that. I think at this time it actually wasn't a creepy thing. Like, I don't think he had started sexually assaulting anybody or doing anything weird. He did flirt a lot, though. A lot of people would say he would like different boys that worked at the candy store. He would like walk by them and pinch them on the arm or something like that.
Like a creepy old uncle.
Yeah. Like really weird. Not on like the butt or anything, but still like, gotcha. You know, it's like, okay.
You're not going to give me a hug?
Like, yeah. Like,
you're holding me a little tight, uncle. It's okay.
Yeah. So in 1967, Dean started becoming friends with a 12-year-old boy named David Brooks. This boy will be very prevalent to the story because he will actually become one of Dean's accomplices. Now, during this time, Dean was also doing weird shit that no one seemed worried about. And honestly, I don't understand why people didn't seem worried about this. His employee said when he needed to like blow off steam or like shit was going awry at the candy store, so he needed to like do something, like most people would be like, let's put a workout gym in here. You know, a boss would be like, let's pump some iron if we're pissed or something, you know, I don't know, or go punch some walls or something. His idea of blowing off steam was to dig holes behind the candy store. Even sometimes at night, People would
What?
see him digging holes in the back of the candy
That is
store.
the weirdest thing ever.
Exactly.
What?
He also had concrete bags in his office and plastic wrap. And
Suspicious.
nobody was like, the fuck is all this shit
Me
for?
and you would definitely
Yeah.
be like, you're
I'd be
murdering
like,
people, aren't you?
Whose bodies are you hiding? Because, the fuck you need this concrete and these plastic bags for? And all these holes you're digging.
I mean, this
So
was
I
like
think
the
somebody of-
60s or 70s?
Yeah, 1967.
So,
Almost the 70s.
like, there was murderers around. I mean,
Oh
why did
yeah,
they
I
put
mean, like,
two and two together?
during this time was, like, in the 70s was, Night Stalker.
Night Stalker,
And then not too long after this whole situation with him, like 3 years later, John Wayne Gacy, which he said that he got a lot of his style or ideas from
him?
Dean Corll. So, where was I? Oh, so he told so some people that were asking questions like, "Why the hell are you doing this?" He would tell them, "Oh, I'm simply burying the old apples that we don't use for the candy, like to make the candy apples, and the pecans because I don't want bugs to get into the other batches that we have." Why the fuck wouldn't you just throw them in the trash?
Yeah, that's really weird.
Like, why would you bury them in the backyard? Like,
that makes no sense. You could have been like,
and
I'm guarding.
somebody was like, and I guess these people that asked the question was like, "Oh yeah, okay, seems legit." Just what the fuck? No,
Maybe
does
they
not.
don't know candy, so they were thinking they were trying to like be like, oh, I know candy. I know what you're talking about. Me
Yeah.
too, honestly.
Yeah, you're the candy man. You're the expert. I got
You're
you.
the expert.
Yeah, because I was like, they had trash. This wasn't like the 1800s. Why didn't you just throw it in the trash?
Yeah.
Whatever. So anyways, so back to the 12-year-old named David, who was his friend at the time. He would take him on all these beach trips I mentioned, and that, like I told you about, they would go surf and all that. And when he needed cash, Dean would give him money. Eventually, though, the relationship between them became sexual. It's said that David was about 14 when Dean started paying him cash or paying him in gifts to give the boy a blowjob. So, not that he wanted a blowjob from the boy.
He wanted to give
him
a blowjob.
one. And he'd be like, "I'll pay you cash and I'll pay you in gifts.
Yeah.
What do you want, you know?" So, I will say, David didn't have the best upbringing. Like, I mean, his mom was around, but his dad knew he was, or thought he was gay. So he would call him like a sissy boy and all this other stuff. And he was just kind of a douchebag. The mother, at this point, while all this shit's kind of going on, ends up marrying a man who turns into like a super douche. And there's kind of like a story about this whole like psychotic episode, the family feud thing that they have with this man that she marries, but I'm not gonna go into that. But it's a bunch of drama. And the new man and him don't get along. Like, he pretty much calls Dean gay all the time, and he accuses him of stealing stuff and just all kinds of bunch of shit. So anyways,
he runs away a lot, I'm guessing, from the home.
Dean?
Oh,
I'm
thought you were
talking
talking about
Dean.
David.
No. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Dean. Dean's mom ends up marrying another guy. She marries a lot of different guys, and her whole thing like is. Sorry, had to get a drink of water. Her whole thing is like she always wants to seem younger than she is. I think she even like lies about her age a lot sometimes. She's just trying to escape the inevitable that we all are of old age. But anyways, so the candy business suffers because of this, because she marries this psychotic dude, and Dean has to get a second job. He starts working at the Houston power plant. Now, a little bit after this, Dean's mom and sister moved to Colorado, and they closed the candy business. That's when Dean gets his first apartment, and David, who's 15 now, would stay there a lot with him. So, like I said, his dad was kind of a douchebag, and he would, like, leave a lot. I don't know where he told his dad he was going. I don't know if he told him he was going there or somewhere else, but he would leave and he would go stay with Dean. He's 15. Dean is, at this time, I believe, 27, 28. He's almost 30. Yeah.
Wow.
So when he moved into this apartment, a lot of people said that he had like tons of parties with teen boys. So much so it got to the point where he would have to move like 5 times a year from apartment to apartment to apartment. And I don't know if it was because the neighbors were like making complaints or if the tenants were just like, get the fuck out. Because they would have like rager parties and he would invite all these teen boys over to throw these parties. There was like drugs and alcohol and all different kinds of stuff. Around this time, he kills his first victim, Jeffrey Conan. He was 18, which is said to be his first victim, but like I said, we don't really know if there were more victims like those, holes he was digging in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Because he was doing those holes. So he was digging those holes, like, after the so-said first victim, right?
No, before.
Before. Okay.
Before.
Well,
because it's before the candy store closed.
Okay.
So this is after
that's
the
weird.
candy store closes.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Like,
but
does he tell... Wait, is he telling this, that all these victims, or his mom?
No. His mom only tells us about...
His childhood?
His childhood. David is the one telling us about this.
David. Okay.
And another kid that'll eventually come into play that's also one of his accomplices. So he has 2 accomplices.
Yeah. So it sounds like he probably had more victims. It's just David showed up at that time. Yeah.
Has no idea. And you would think that the police would be like, oh, well, fuck. Let's go dig up these holes. But they never do that.
They never dig up those holes?
The police in this, I don't know. They're in the... And I'll get to it. I wrote it down somewhere. They're in some sort of district of Houston, which kind of like poverty-stricken, lower class at the time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if the police just don't care, but all these victims, there's 28 of these motherfuckers. All these victims go missing in like a 3-mile radius. Like, this is not a big this is not a big city or, something like that. And nothing ever he doesn't ever get caught until he dies. And I'll explain that in part 2. Yeah. Because I don't want to give too much away. But it's just crazy. So anyways, where was I?
His first
his first victim. And I wasn't calling the victims, I said motherfuckers, but like I'm talking about like these people, like the guys, like Dean and the other 2, they're his accomplices. Like
Dean and David and whoever the third one is that's coming along.
Yeah, they don't live in a big city, So, what was I talking about? Oh,
the first victim.
Jeffrey Conan. I just wanted to say Connor. Jeffrey Conan was 18. This was September 25th, 1970. Conan vanished while he was hitchhiking from University of Texas back to his parents' house, and a lot of people think that he probably just got in the car with Dean. Dean picked him up, probably offered him a ride back to the house or whatever. Back to his parents' house. Jeffrey's parents' house. But he obviously took him back to his apartment because he was found later dead. He had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and tied up by his hands and feet. When police found his body, he was covered in lime. So that's another thing that I wanted to say. Like, his body was covered in lime, which is usually used, the lime powder.
To smell.
It's usually used to help
smell.
No, that plus to help the decomposition.
Yeah.
And they'll use it for like animals or something like that and other stuff. But he was also wrapped in a plastic sheet as well. So the police were thinking, okay, this is like a professional killer.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I think that wasn't really his first kill. Because he wouldn't be that organized. I mean, it's usually messy. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, David is still with him at this time. 15. Keep that in mind. This is a 27-year-old. And pretty much living with him on and off. One day he walks in and Dean has 2 boys tied to the headboard, like one on each side, and he is molesting them. Dean gets mad, but tells him, I pay these boys to make pornos for me, and then I sell them online. And so David was like, okay, because David, like, ran off. Like, when he saw that, yeah.
I was supposed to say, why didn't the boys say, like, bitch, no?
Yeah. When he saw them, he, like, took off. And so Dean got mad, called up with him later, and he was like, yeah, I do this for porn. I pay them, and then I make money, send it to California. But then, like, a few days later, like 3 days later, Dean comes up to him, and he was like, so, here's the thing. I lied. I actually killed those boys, and I buried them in my storage shed. Please don't be mad. And
what?
And David said that he was like, okay, but he ends up, like, there wasn't really much, I don't really know what he said, but he was just like, okay, I guess he was okay with it, because he ends up dropping out of school and pretty much lives with Dean full time. Like, he just moves out of his parents' house or his dad's house.
I was expecting him to, like, run away or something.
Mm-mm. It's at this point that David becomes one of these accomplices with Dean.
How do you find these people? God.
Well, I will say this. David is a,
Victim.
Obviously a piece of shit, but he's also, he was groomed from a really, he was groomed since he was 12. So, this guy, and he even said, like, I looked at him as, like, my father figure first, and then when the sexual stuff started happening, then it was more of, like,
a lover kind of thing.
And there are times, and I'll get to it eventually, I'll probably mention this again, but there's, like, one time where he, wants to leave, but Dean ends up, like, raping him, and as, like, a dominance thing. And David's not gay. Come to find out, like, later on, he gets a girlfriend. He might have been, like, experimenting or whatever when he was younger, but later on, he gets a girlfriend. He wants to, like, get out of the situation, stop doing the murders and all that, but Dean's like, no, you're not fucking leaving, and he like, ties him up and rapes him as, like, a dominance, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You're not gonna
Alpha
leave me.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. And so he doesn't because of that. Now, where was I?
He tells him.
Yeah. When David turned 16, Dean bought him a green Corvette and told him, first of all, hold on.
How does he get all this money?
Yeah, because he buys him a green Corvette and he tells him, I'll pay you $200 for any boy that you can lure to my apartment. $200 a boy. I don't know how he has enough money to pay him $200 a boy. And the next guy that we talk about that comes into play later on, he offers him the same position.
He must be stealing the money from the dead people. The victims, not the dead people.
Well, no, because they're
victims.
They're 15. They're kids, so they don't have money on them like that. I don't have a clue. He must be making really good money at the light company. So Jimmy Glass and Danny Yates are the first victims David helps lure to Dean's apartment on December 13th, 1970. Both were 14 and David's friends. You'll come to find out that a lot of these people that David helps lure and the next boy, they're all friends. Because they're all classmates.
Yeah.
This whole community is not very big, so everybody knows everybody. And also, all these kids that he ends up abducting and killing, they all know him as the Candyman, the guy from the candy store. So when they were younger, when they were like, 11, 12, they would go to the candy store.
Yeah, it's somebody that you trust.
Exactly.
Someone that you've seen as a kid. I could understand trusting him.
Yeah. So the families, after the kids, these two boys get kidnapped, I think they got kidnapped from, like, church or something, or they were at church, and then they last were seen, like, leaving, getting up and leaving, and then they didn't see them again. So they immediately went to the police, the families did, and they were like, our kids are missing, blah, 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 blah. The police just say that they're runaways.
Of course.
They do no investigation. After getting to the apartment, both boys were tied up by Dean on his torture board, and I'll kind of explain that later. They were then raped, strangled, and buried in a boat shed that Dean had actually been renting at the time. 6 weeks later, on January 30th, 1971, Dean and David were driving around when they spotted 15-year-old Donald and 13-year-old Jerry Waldroff, 2 teenage brothers. Dean's MO remains the same throughout these murders. So instead of me like mentioning every single time something happens, I'm just gonna kind of tell you right here what he does. So big like disclaimer, if you don't want to hear this part, skip past it. Okay, so he would give them drugs when they got back to the apartment, or alcohol to like get them loose. Sometimes, other times, if the boys didn't want drugs and alcohol, he would actually like play this little trick where he had like the handcuffs, and he would pretend to like handcuff himself and be able to get out of it, but he actually had the key in his hands.
Didn't John Gacy
John
do
Gacy,
that?
yeah, that's where he got that idea from.
Yeah.
And then he would be like, okay, you try, and then they would try, but they wouldn't be able to get out of it because they don't have the key.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they would get themselves handcuffed. He would then take them to his 4-post bed or his torture board, which was like a piece of plywood with holes in it where he could handcuff them in a spread eagle position. He would strap them down, rape them, torture them, sometimes for days. He would beat them and then strangle them. Full disclaimer right here, not that it's already bad, but one of the torture methods that he used was something I've never even come into my brain to think of. Like, because we do like, I've listened to the podcast about different torture methods back in the day, and this is crazy. He would take a thin rod of glass, like a really thin rod of glass. He would insert it into the boy's urethra.
Oh.
And then he would smash the glass inside. Yeah. So these were sick, crazy fucking like torture methods, like absolutely fucking insane. The police found a lot of sex toys and torture devices when they finally, got to his place. We'll get there way later. From the look of the bodies, also when the police found the bodies, they could tell that a lot of these boys, this is so fucking sad, but they could tell that a lot of these boys probably died screaming because their mouths were like open. Oh. In a like contorted like way. And the medical examiner said that could be something that happened. He also had an abduction van. Not like the one that he had before. This was a different one. There was like a
white van?
It was a white van, but he had like straps and stuff in there, and he had a box that had holes in it. So I guess like if he abducted them, he could throw them in there. You know what I mean?
So it was kind of like his capture van.
Yeah, I guess so. His usual way of killing them would either be to strangle them or shoot them. He ended up getting a gun, and he would shoot some of them in the head. One other thing he would make the kids do was he would make them write letters back home saying that they had ran away, so they wouldn't go looking for them. Now, that's not to say that the police already had these letters, so I don't want anybody thinking, well, that's why the police didn't go look for them. No. The police thought every single one of these motherfucking kids were just runaways. I don't understand why.
That is so fucking stupid. Like, they've all agreed, let's all run away.
All these kids that I'm going to mention today, which I lost count on how many it is today that we're going to talk about, but they're all runaways. They just tell the parents, they just ran away. Or sometimes they would tell the parents, like, maybe they got kidnapped by a sex ring or something like that.
Well, why? Sorry. Why aren't you trying to find them then? Why aren't you trying to investigate? You're doing nothing.
So, the Waldroff family, the 2 brothers, gets a call one night after their sons go missing. And this caller says, I saw the man who used to run the candy store. His name is Dean Corll, at a boat shed. And it looked like he was burying something, and it kind of looked like bodies. My son said it kind of looked like bodies too. I don't know if this has anything to do with your sons, but you may want to check it out. And then hung up the phone. So they call the police immediately, and they're like, oh my God, and they tell them the whole story. You need to go to the boat shed, like, right now. So you're thinking, okay, well, this is it. Like, this piece of shit gets caught. This is how he gets caught. No. The police go there, and they just look around with their flashlights, and then they're just like, yeah, that was a prank call. And then they leave.
What?
Yeah, dead ass. Yeah, I don't understand it.
You gotta look, like, in the ground, you dumbass.
Yeah.
So bring,
like,
dogs.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Like,
so he's not gonna pop out and be like, oh, here I am over here.
Yeah. I don't understand it. I'm laughing because it pisses me off. Like, I don't get it.
This is ridiculous.
I don't know. After this, Randall Harvey, disappears. Keep in mind, all these boys don't live super far apart. Like I said, this isn't like a different different counties or anything. This is all in one little spot. So Randall is 15 and he was abducted May 9th. Also, he is the 8th victim because there's like 2 more boys that go missing before that. Mm-hmm. David knew Randall, and when he picked him up, he took him to Dean's. He was never seen alive again. So May 29th, 1971, 13-year-old David Hillingist and 16-year-old Mally Winkle. Mm-hmm. I love that name.
Me too.
They were abducted and killed as well. All these parents, by the way, are launching like massive search parties at this time. And the police, like I said, just keep saying, oh, you need to not worry about it. Your kids have just run off. Some of them are going to like the beaches or something like that. And maybe they were having runaways at the time in Houston. But that doesn't mean that all these freaking kids that know each other pretty much, or are acquaintances with each other, are just disappearing in this spot. Nobody's like, something's going on. And then most of the bodies they're finding,
I feel like they knew.
Like they find them later, I guess. But
or he paid them off.
They find
or
them later. They find them later. They don't find them right away.
Yeah, but
still,
the fact that they didn't look in the ground after this guy literally tells you he sees it, and they just kind of look at it.
Man that used to own the candy store.
That's so really weird.
Or at least bring dogs and like have them sniff out the scent of the boys' clothes and then have them search. Like that's what I didn't understand why they didn't do that. So yeah, they're massive. They are launching massive search parties. David Hillingist. Yes. Parents spend all their money and they actually hire a private investigator. So the private investigator, he's good. He does what he needs to do, but he's way off base. He actually says that he thinks the boys are in a sex trafficking ring, like they got kidnapped for that. Which, he does a really good job, though. So things are about to take a turn when we introduce Elmer Wayne Henley. This will be the boy that helps him. Like, he's another accomplice. He was actually friends with David Hillingist. I cannot say that for some reason. Wayne was 15, and he even went to David's parents' house and wanted to hand out like flyers and stuff. Granted, at the time he doesn't know what's going on with Dean and David, but it's just kind of messed up that later on he becomes an accomplice, and this was his friend that got abducted by this asshole. It's just weird. So Wayne had a very rough childhood. His dad was a very abusive alcoholic. He even tried to like shoot his mom one time. Everyone said that Wayne was on drugs and seemed a little off in the head. He dropped out of school and started burglarizing houses at this time as well. Wayne knew Dean Corll, the Candyman, because him and David were friends, and like he would go over to the house when he'd have parties and stuff like that. Because keep in mind, Dean's still throwing parties all the time with these teen boys. That's another thing. Why did the police not go, this fucking weirdo?
Yeah.
Is throwing parties with all these teen boys.
And obviously they would find out that they have recently been hanging out with him. They would have put that together like so freaking quick.
Yeah.
So quick.
Yeah.
It would have been so easy. Like,
this
they didn't even lift a finger.
Yeah, no, they didn't lift one single pinky. So, well, where was I at? Oh, Wayne knew Dean because him and David were friends, and Wayne knew Dean was gay. But he was like, oh, he's just a cool older dude, you know. I know he's gay, but it's no big deal. Wayne even helped put I said that already. He put up the posters of David, the missing posters. Meanwhile, before Wayne officially starts helping, becomes an accomplice, there's 3 more murders of 3 different boys. Now, winter of 1971, David decides to lure Wayne to Dean's apartment to be his next victim. So first, that's what Dean wanted. Dean was like, I want Wayne to be a victim. Mm-hmm. Some reason or another, not sure why, when David gets him there, Dean decides, okay, I'm going to make you my next accomplice. And he tells him, I'm going to pay you $200, just like I do David, for any boy that you can bring through my door. And
Wayne must have said something like really...
I don't know. He told Wayne he told him he doesn't kill them. He said he just uses them. He said he just gets them and sends the boys off to be slavery people. Yeah. Like sex trafficking. That's what he told Wayne he did. And Wayne was like, $200 a boy? I'll bring you all the boys for that. So he was completely fine with it, and he decided that's what he was going to do. And then I'm just sitting here thinking, these are your classmates that you're luring. And you know where your friend David just went.
Like, I couldn't just...
Obviously, so he didn't kill him, but he sent him to a sex trafficker. Yeah. Like, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then I'd go straight to the fucking police.
Yeah. Like, I couldn't do that with my friends. Like, who can do that?
I don't know. So Wayne's first job to lure in was a teen boy. No one knows who this boy was. They don't even know to this day who he was. And he just lures him there and then leaves. So he doesn't know what happens to him.
Scary.
After that.
That'd be like one of my friends being like, you want to go over to his house? I'd be like, okay. And then they just murder me.
So Houston Heights is the place where these kids were getting abducted. I couldn't remember what it's called, but I knew I wrote it in my notes somewhere. So it's called Houston Heights. It's this small little district. March 24th, 1972, they lure a 19-year-old boy named Frank Aguirre. I'm horrible with last names. To the apartment. But this is slightly different because Frank is engaged and he's an older guy. Mm-hmm. But after that's when they kill him. Well, Dean kills him. And then that's when Wayne realizes, oh, okay, he kills people because they all go help bury the body. So it's at this point that we obviously know, okay, Wayne does know that he murders people. And you would think that he would be like, well, fuck, I guess that means he murdered my friends and all those other people.
Yeah,
but
two and two together.
He doesn't care, though. He just doesn't care.
That's really weird.
So, they did ask David, like, did you ever torture any of the boys or touch any of the boys? David never touched any of the boys. He was always just the guy that brought them there. And then they would, Dean would do all the torture and killing and everything. David would actually leave. Like, all the boys before this, David would drop them off. He would handcuff them or whatever. Dean would take them back to the bedroom, and David would leave.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's one thing that they asked him, and that's what he said. But Wayne, however, he said Wayne at first didn't participate, but then he started participating in the torture. A month later, Wayne brings a 17-year-old named Mark Scott. He was buried at the High Island Beach. And then June 26, Billy Belch and Johnny Delmon were also brought there by Wayne. David said that this is when Wayne started getting kind of sadistic because he actually he was strangling Billy and then he called Johnny's name because they were like on the same bed beside each other. So he was on top of Billy strangling him, and then he called Johnny's name, and Johnny looked at him. He said, "Hey, look at this," and he looked at him, and then he shot him in the head. But he didn't die because they're only using I think they use 22 caliber pistols. So if you don't shoot somebody really precise, it won't kill them. So he didn't kill him. He didn't do it didn't shoot him in his brain. So he bled out to death, and then he jumps on him, or bleeds out. He's bleeding out. Then he jumps on him, starts strangling him. Just weird shit.
Oh.
So 14 months later, they actually abduct Billy's little brother, Tony Belch. David, during this time, like I told you, this is when he was like, yeah, I'm kind of gonna fade out. I'm just gonna ease myself out of the situation. So he had the girlfriend, he had another job, and he went to Dean's house one day, just going in casually, and that's when Wayne jumped him from behind, and then Dean tied him down, raped him.
Wow.
That was that situation.
Yeah.
And Wayne was the one that helped do that. So, summer of 1972, Dean moves into another apartment complex at Westcott Towers. And that is where we're going to end part 1.
Okay.
Woo! That was a lot. That was a lot to get through. We made it to the hour mark. Well, we're at 55 minutes. It'll be an hour in a second. So yes, that is part 1, and we will have part 2 up for you guys next Friday. But it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting.
The way that things happen, the way that Dean dies is crazy. I kind of wanted him to, suffer in jail or die by lethal injection so the victims' parents can watch, but whatever. Yeah, 28 victims though. And maybe more, and I've never heard of this man before in my life. I haven't heard of this one. And I listened to a podcast, and I also did research different articles. So there was only, when I went to go listen to a podcast, because I was like, I want to listen to a podcast, and then I'll read. I usually listen to a podcast and read as I'm doing it, if there's one out there. And so that's what I was doing, and there was only maybe 3 different people that had done this guy. Yeah, so it's really crazy, but a lot of good information, and y'all don't go research this guy until you listen to part 2, because I don't want you to know what happens. So anyways, all right.
Okay.
Well, we will see you guys next Friday. We hope that you guys have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you then. All right, bye.
Bye.